Hey, every Sunday morning, you have the opportunity to change a child's life through the Kids Church large group experience. Now, there are many ways to do church, but I believe that the Kids Church experience is one of the most important and one of the most effective ways possible. But can we make this promise to ourselves that we will no longer do the sit down and shut up type of ministry, type of kids church? All right, let's create a kids church that's fun and interactive and full of play. Play is often talked about as if it were a relief from serious learning, but according to Fred Rogers, play is serious learning for kids. Fred Rogers says play is really the work of childhood. In other words, kids communicate through playing. Kids learn by playing. You can either have a kid that is sitting still, or you can have a child who's learning, but they can't do both things at the same time. So the question is, how do you create an environment in which kids can learn through interactivity and engagement? Because as we all know, an engaged child is a well-behaved child. Kids pastor Jason Noble said this: if you don't put on a show for your kids, they're going to put on a show for you. And it's true. We see that week in and week out. If what you're doing in your kids' church environment isn't fun and engaging and interactive, the kids are going to find their own ways to interact, and more than likely, it's not going to be constructive. The Bible says this is Romans, but how can they call on him to save them unless they believe in him? And how can they believe in him if they have never heard about him? And how can they hear about him unless someone tells them? Well, the kids' church version would ask this: how can they, the kids, believe in him if they have never heard about him? And how can they hear about him if their kids' church is so boring that they can't concentrate on what's going on in front of them? Our job is to create an environment and an atmosphere that reaches kids at their level, that communicates with kids in the ways that they learn. So let's talk about the 4 learning styles. We've got visual, auditory, kinesthetic, tactile. Visual is simple. It's what you see. Auditory is what you hear. Kinesthetic is what you do, and tactile is what you touch. If you miss out on any of those, you're neglecting 25% of your audience at any given moment. So the answer is to create an environment that caters to all 4. Typically, we do visual well, we do auditory well through teaching, but how can we do kinesthetic and tactile well? Well, there's a great philosopher whose name is Silly Billy, or kids magician David Kay, and he has this meter that he uses in his magic shows. He calls it the interactions per minute. And what he says is that every minute he wants kids to interact 6 times with him. In other words, every 10 seconds he wants kids to do something that will allow him to know that they're with him. Now, here's some interactions that we want from kids. Number 1, we want them to listen. We want, when we communicate, when we speak, when we teach, we want to know that they're listening, that they're attentive with their ears. We also want them emoting. Now, sometimes that's laughing. Laughter is a way to express joy. We might even at some points want them crying, not sad tears, but maybe they're so engaged in what you're teaching and what God is communicating to them that they respond through tears. That's okay. Another thing we want them to do is to play. We want to give them opportunities where they can interact through playing. Sometimes even giving kids a certain amount of time to play without structure is a great thing. We also want them to participate, whether that means that if you're leading a kids' church game, that kids are allowing themselves to be a part of that game. And then we want them to respond to what's going on. And that means that they're answering questions. If they're in a small group, they're contributing to conversation. These are all ways that kids can interact with what's going on in your kids' church service or your kids' church time. Now, here are some concepts that you can use to make your kids' church awesome. First of all, you want to gamify everything. Possibly you're familiar with the elf on the shelf during Christmas time. The way that the elf on the shelf character works is every morning around Christmas time, kids wake up to find this elf, a toy elf, that's in a certain part of the house. They have to go through the house and find this elf, and if they behave or whatever they're doing, that elf will communicate to Santa Claus. So if they're misbehaving, the elf will communicate to Santa Claus that these kids don't deserve presents. If they're behaving well, then the elf will communicate that they should get prizes. We took that concept and we introduced it into our kids' church service, except we called it Walter the Wandering Wise Man. And the story was this. The story is that Walter was on his way to see baby Jesus long time ago, and he ended up getting lost. And he's been wandering through the lands all this time, and it just so happens that he found his way to our church. So every time Walter pops up, he comes in bearing gifts. And if the kids, for just a few moments, can gather themselves and be absolutely still, it's possible that they will receive a gift from Walter, the Wandering Wise Man. Whether that's points, whether that's candy, whatever it is, we used Walter to get kids' attention, even if it's just for a few moments. Another thing that we do a lot of is we do memory verse challenges, or we use a special phrase for the morning that we call the big word, and allowing kids to stand up and scream out the memory verse, scream out the phrase or the big word, allows them to be engaged in what they're doing. We also have this. We pass out points on Sunday mornings, and we've developed this concept called ping pong points. And the way that ping pong points works is this. If we tell the girls that they're going to get 500 points, but in order to keep those points, they have to stand up and flex their muscles, they get to keep those points. However, if they can't do that, then we're going to give the boys the opportunity to do that. And we keep going ping-ponging back and forth to see what team can all do the one motion or the one movement or the one activity or whatever. Another thing that you can do to make your kids' church awesome is to add some tension and danger. Now, do I mean real danger in the room? No, of course not. But to use magic tricks or object lessons where there are some elements that maybe seem like they're not working. Maybe it seems like you've made a mistake, or maybe it seems like something's gone wrong. It makes the kids that much more attentive to what's going on, mostly because they want to see you mess up, but that's okay. Another thing is telling stories that might end badly. Adding a little bit of intrigue and danger to stories that you tell on Sunday morning will typically get kids to pay attention to the story that you're telling. Another way to make kids' church awesome is to involve everybody. Here's a game that we play. It's called Animal Roll Call. We call one child up to the front. We blindfold him. We put up a picture of an animal, and all the kids in the seats have to make the noise of that animal. If the kid that's on stage with the blindfold can guess what that animal is, he wins a prize. He wins some candy, whatever it is. But that allows all the kids in the room to participate in this one game that would normally only be done by the one child on stage. We also create interactive Bible reading times. If you use a Fire Bible for Kids, this would work great for you. The Fire Bible for Kids is the official Bible of our kids' church, so that when we're teaching from the Bible, we can tell kids not only what the passage and the reference is for the Bible verse or Bible story, we can tell them what page number it is. And because most of them have a Fire Bible, they can all turn to that page in their Bible. We also tell interactive Bible stories. We'll call kids up front to act it out, but another thing that we'll do is we'll have all the kids stand up and act out the Bible story. So if we're going through Jericho, we have all the kids march. And when it's time for the walls of Jericho to come down, all the kids scream and pretend like they're falling, and that allows them to use their natural energy, their natural desire to move and to play in a way that's constructive and helps to make what you're teaching that much more memorable. In fact, we try to allow movement during our entire kids' church service. So we'll give kids, for example, when we're preaching, if we're talking about Joseph wore a beautiful coat. So we tell kids to listen for the name Joseph, and every time they hear that name, they have to pretend like they're putting on a coat. We also have done these muscle memory verse games where instead of kids telling us what words we pulled out of our memory verse, we have them flex or do different motions to communicate what the word is. In fact, one time we did this huge wrestling match, and we had these big wrestlers that would wrestle each other, and the victory was determined by whether or not kids knew what the words that were missing were from the memory verse. We do creative altar calls in which kids can come up to the front and draw or color or write. There's a ton of ways to make your kids' church awesome. The only limit is your imagination.